My name is Simon Gillis. I'm a Technical Specialist Manager here at Autodesk, and today you've joined us for a webinar on an introduction to Autodesk Revit LT. Just before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me, so I'm just going to run some polls here. So first of all, I'd just like to know if you are currently a Revit user or not. So I'm just going to launch that poll now, and if we can just see some answers there. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So you can hear me, which is a good sign. So we're looking at about 70% of you are currently not using Revit. That's great. Let me just close that poll now. Thank you very much. And next one, can you just tell me if you're currently an AutoCAD or an AutoCAD LT user? Okay, so the majority of you are currently using AutoCAD or AutoCAD LT. Excellent. Just going to close that poll down. Thanks very much for your participation there. Just to let you know, in the background I have my colleague Ralph Pullinger, who will be available to answer questions today. We have an awful lot of people on, currently over 230. So if you do have a question, the best thing to do will actually be to ask your questions panel within your GoToMeeting control panel itself. Okay, Ralph will try and answer as many as possible throughout the course of the webinar, and I've also set aside time to make sure that we can answer some at the end as well. Okay, so let's get on. So first of all, I would just say is I just want to make it clear the aims of this webinar, and that is very much that it's aimed at the basic level. We're not going into lots of detail. This is really about giving you information to help you make that decision around whether Revit LT is the right product for you. The majority of the focus of this is very much at the non-Revit user. So those of you who have not yet moved to a Revit workflow within your business. What I also want to make sure we achieve is that we explain the differences between what I would call for this purpose full Revit and Revit LT. Okay. So just a little bit first to set the scene around building information modeling. Here at Autodesk, we're very much about data-driven design processes. And for what we call the AEC space, architecture, engineering and construction, our methodology here is very much around building information modeling. I'm not going to spend the webinar going in depth around building information modeling. There's a lot of information out there. We've done other webinars around it. But I do want to set the scene as to why moving to Revit LT can help you move towards a building information modeling workflow. There's been a lot going on in the industry around the move to BIM. I think it's important to note that this isn't just about buildings. Many users now are designing infrastructure and in industrial complexes using a building information modeling workflow. It's not just about necessarily the standard traditional deliverables. Building information modeling can really apply to the entire life cycle of the building. So from the early planning right through to operation and maintenance and even through to decommissioning. Okay? And that's something that's very important to note. More importantly, building information modeling is really transforming the industry. It's a strategy to transform it, to make it better, to help us deliver better buildings and infrastructure, to help us reduce waste. We're seeing a lot of demand now from client bodies, whether that be governmental or private, who are really asking their supply chain to deliver building information models. They see a real business benefit to doing that, and that's absolutely key. Now, in terms of where we see BIM adoption, it can apply in different stages, to be honest. We're seeing people who've been really using a BIM workflow for many years. They started off in a single firm implementation. They've accelerated through to include more and more of the design team. And then we're now seeing more and more who are actually integrating their entire supply chain. And different individuals are at different stages of this. Many of you on this call today are probably looking at taking the first steps, which is moving towards a single firm implementation. For those of you familiar with the Rogers curve on technology adoption, whenever a technology or a new process is applied, you see different stages of how users adopt that technology. And it's certainly fair to say across Europe, building information modeling has gained a lot of traction. We're seeing projects being built, we're seeing governments mandate it. But there are still some of you out there who have not yet made that move. There may have been reasons for that. Not yet had the project work that demanded it. Maybe a cost implication to changing your business, to change the way that you design. And this is really where Revit LT comes in. It's there as a version of Revit that can help you move towards BIM at your own pace. We offer two versions of it. So first of all, we have the standalone version of Revit LT. This is Revit LT in the box. We also have Revit LT Suite, or I should say AutoCAD Revit LT Suite. And what that includes is both Autodesk Revit LT 2013 and AutoCAD LT 2013. So if you today are currently an AutoCAD LT user, you have an upgrade path to the AutoCAD Revit LT Suite. That will enable you to maintain both your DWG workflows and move to a building information modeling workflow as well. If, as you adopt building information modeling, you see more and more demand for what you need to deliver, there will then be upgrade paths onto the building design suites that we offer. Okay, so what is really Revit LT about? Well, first of all, it's about changing the way that you design. It takes the methodology of a model-based approach. Everything that you deliver is just another view of the model. And I'll be running you through a demonstration that will hopefully highlight that. It's about producing documentation more efficiently. I'm sure, for many of you, there can be challenges to documentation. How do you coordinate more effectively? How do you improve the quality of your documentation? How do you reduce the potential for error? And that's absolutely key. But also, there are more and more demands on you to visualize and communicate more clearly. And a model-based approach can help that through the benefits of visualization. But also, you want to coordinate better, whether that's internally or with the other supply chain members. So if you're an architect, for example, coordinating more effectively with a structural engineer. Model-based design enables you to do this. So, very much about easing the transition to BIM. It's really focused on users without advanced collaboration needs. And what I would say around that is that with Revit LT, you don't have what we call work sharing that you see within the full version of Revit. So really aimed at the individuals who don't need lots of people to work on the model at the same time. Okay? It's really more focused on the single user who would be working on a project and sharing data via linked files, absolutely, but not simultaneously accessing the file. It is fully compatible with Revit, so you can open project files from full Revit, and you can save project files that can then be opened in full Revit as well. That's absolutely key. It is available now in the UK and Ireland, Benelux and the Nordics, so across the Northern Europe region. I've seen some questions coming in asking about price. Price, I would say please talk to your reseller around the price for both LT and the suite. At the end, I've got a wrap up where we can, we've got a call to action for you. Okay, so that's really LT there. I'm going to run a demonstration of it, and I'm then going to get in after the demonstration to the differences between Revit LT and Revit, which some of you are already asking questions about. Some of you may be aware that we also have a cloud strategy at Autodesk known as Autodesk 360. This is giving users the ability to leverage cloud technology to perform different activities that they require. And if you have Revit LT, then you have access to the rendering, collaboration, and storage parts of that. Okay? You don't have access to analysis or simulation, for example. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through. Okay? So with Revit, with subscription, you do have access to various capabilities for our cloud offering. Okay, so let's just set the scene. Let's just go now into a demonstration of the product. And as I said before, very much aimed, okay, very much aimed at the the user who has not yet moved to Revit. Okay, so some of you who are Revit users, probably something you've seen before, but we want to really get across the point in this webinar of the value of moving to model-based design. Okay, so first of all, this is what you're seeing now on screen is Revit LT, and what you'll see is that this is really a model-based approach to design. Everything that you need to deliver is just another view of the model. That could be general arrangement drawings, that could be perspective views, and notice that with a perspective view, we can configure that, we can set it to show different colors, we can show shadowing, for example. It could be an elevation, it could be detail level. You can produce documentation right through to detail level with Revit LT. It could be tabular or schedule information. It could be a material takeoff. The important thing here is that it is just a different representation of the model. What is also important to note is how easy it is to use. Okay, what you're using with Revit is architectural components. You're designing with intelligent architectural objects. So unlike using lines, arcs, and circles, you're able here, for example, to specify a wall type. You can specify how that wall is made up, the different layers within that wall, and you can apply materials to it. And this isn't just for visualization purposes. This could also equally be for material takeoff. So I can specify a type of wall, and I can place that wall. And as you're seeing, I'm just placing that into the plan view. I don't have to learn advanced three-dimensional modeling techniques. I'm drawing as I would in my traditional CAD application, but with less steps. I can add a door in, as you can see here. Apply that door, I can flip that over. Notice it can't be hosted by intercrease space. It has to be hosted by a wall. Also, reducing the amount of time taken to make change with my design. I don't have to be exact from the outset. So if I need to make a change, I can actually build in design intent. I can lock that position of the door, for example, to the wall, make a change, and the door will move with the wall. So we're building in design intent rules to the model as well. I just come across now and select a room object. I've placed a room object in there, and what's important to know is this is not just about tagging. This is not just an attribute that says this is a room. This has, as you can see, information about the area of the room. It could have much more information embedded into it, such as the finishes of the room, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. So I've placed that in, as you can see, I've called it consulting room. It's going to have an impact on other views. So just switching now to a color fill plan. And what you can see here is I've got a color fill based on room names, and I can apply a whole range of Pantone colors to that. I don't need to post-process my drawings. I can do it within Revit LT itself. I can tag that room if it's not already tagged. The color has been determined by the room name. So very easy for me to produce additional documentation in less time. But also I can append more information to that room object. In this case, I've got some departments. So this is a retail store, and I've nominated departments for various parts of the store. What you'll see at the moment is that room that I put in is not currently colored. And that's because it doesn't have a department assigned to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the room schedule or room data sheet, and you'll see that I can select a department. So I'm just going to make that back of store. There are many other things I can do within this schedule. I could, for example, specify a schedule key and apply a room type. And what you're seeing here is that as I apply that room type, it automatically propagates the finishes within there. I can add information as well, equipment within that room, and what have you. As I switch back to that view, notice that it now has the color fill. So the information that I'm putting into the model has an impact on the actual documentation that I'm getting out of it. So there's a lot of power in the use of the eye within BIM. I've also got a view here that you can see is what we call a crop section. So an important part of moving to BIM is the design insight that you get, the fact that you get that earlier on. So here, for example, just changing to a fine level of detail, and what you'll see here is that I'm able to look through the building. I can see very easily how the different components are fitting together. It makes it easier for me to spot if For example, I've not made a design decision as I should. In that example, I had actually got a poor stair opening that I needed to address. But also with this, I'm able to utilize model data from other stakeholders. In this case, I have a structural model. I could also have a building services model. Important to note, the tool set within Revit LT is very much architectural focused. Yes, you can create structure, but you can't create all of the advanced structure and analytical data behind it. You certainly can't create the building ducts, pipes, what we call building services within the model. Okay, so that's something to note. You can leverage the data that comes from the other parties as linked files within Revit LT. Moving on to visualization, we don't have rendering within the product itself. What we're doing here is we're utilizing our Autodesk 360 rendering technology to enable you to produce renders. So not tying up your machine whilst visualizing, you're utilizing the materials that you've applied. You can set up the settings in the viewport. You submit that to the cloud. You can carry on working. It will then come back and tell you specifically when that render is complete. And you can download that render and you can then put that into your documentation set. So you've got the ability there to produce rendering information. Okay, so let's just move on and let's look at some other aspects. So I want to cut a section. Now when I worked in architecture many, many years ago, I was never a fan of creating sections. What I'm going to do now is I'm just drawing a section line through the model itself, as you can see. I can open that section from the project browser, and as you can see, I can also open it from the section tag. And I've now got my section opened. You'll see lots of information there. I've got some grids and things, levels, which have come from the linked models, so I can actually hide those just to tidy up my section. I could also create a view template to help me to do that. And what you'll see now is I'm just going to tile these together now. And I'm just going to tile these horizontally. What's very important to know is that this model is live. You are creating a virtual prototype of your building. You're building it twice, if you like. Once virtually and then on site. Building it virtually gives you the advantage that you can iron out a lot of the problems before you get to site. We're seeing customers with, getting extreme cost savings through doing that. So I've got my section here. I'm just dragging it. As you see, as I drag it, the view above automatically updates. This is live. You are creating building elements that only exist once in the database. So here, for example, I selected a door. You'll see it's highlighted in both the section and in the plan view. I can change the type of door. It will change that property everywhere. So just looking at door 24 here, what you'll see is that with that door, I can change the door within the schedule. It will automatically update within all of the other views. It's maintaining consistency of documentation, reducing the potential for error in the documentation that goes out, which ultimately is going to reduce the potential for wastage on site as well. Okay? So just let's look at another area of coordination. Just zooming into the section tab, as you can see there, and I'm just going to open up a sheet. And what you'll see is I've got a sheet. I can absolutely create sheets as I do today in my traditional CAD application. And I'm just going to drag that section onto that sheet. It automatically lines up with the plan, but notice that the section tag has automatically filled out. Again, the change engine of Revit is managing the coordination. If I change the sheet number, the tag, okay, is automatically updated as well. And that's absolutely key to effective coordination. Okay, so absolutely important that within model-based design is that you're managing change. And that's where you get a significant benefit over what you may be doing today within traditional CAD. Let's look at, whilst I'm on the theme of sections, I'm just going to draw a section through another part of the building here, through the dock shelter for the lorries to access. So I can go into, and create sections. From those sections, I can also create call-outs. Okay, so I can go in and zoom into areas of those sections. I can open that automatically. I can change the scale. Notice if I change the scale, it automatically updates aspects such as the notation. So I only have to specify, for example, 2.5 high text. It will always be 2.5 high text. If I change the level of detail now to fine, I'm looking through the building. This is looking actually through the model itself, but I've also got the ability to append two-dimensional data to it. So I can have a hybrid view here of drafted information and modeled information. The level of detail will control what I actually see in the view. So here, for example, just adding on repeating detail, which shows the block work. I can then tag that. The information that I've embedded into the wall type is automatically picked up when I tag, as you can see here. If I just go into a more detailed view that I've created previously, you'll see the level of detail that I can actually append to these views. So we've got that ability to draft, but also tie it to the underlying model. So now if I change the height of my dock shelter, I can bring that onto, I'm able to update the drafted information automatically because I've locked it to the model. Continuing on around tagging, just looking at a call out of the elevation here, notice again, the view information, I'm tagging what's in the view, it's consistent. Wherever I tag, the same tag appears. Again, helps with my quality of documentation. If I need to make a change to any of those elements, so for example, here what I'm going to do is just change to a solid panel, notice that it automatically updates the notation as well. It's tied to the model. The notation is not just a standalone piece of text that could come out of sequence with the model itself. What we're also able to do within the model is look at design alternatives. So maybe I'm looking at a room layout, maybe I'm looking at different facade options, maybe I've got some different options for the building envelope. I can build those into the same model and compare them. So here, for example, I've got a different layout of my merchandisers within the supermarket, and I'm able to actually schedule those off and compare them. So as you can see here, I've got two different costs based on the different layouts themselves. So, very important to know, you're creating the building information model. You are creating your building virtually before you build it for real. Every view that you need to deliver is just another view of the model. You can start without putting much information in, because at any time you can change to more specific information. It means you can start sketching out very, very quickly with the building components that you have, and then you can customize them to more meet your requirement later on in the design. All of your views will be coordinated. So today, if you're drawing in traditional CAD and you draw a plan and you make a change to the door that I changed earlier, you're then going to have to go and manually change that in the section, change that in the elevation, and change that in the schedule. This is really giving you more time to design and less requirement to document. This is where Revit LT is particularly aimed at helping you with that documentation, design and documentation phase. So for those of you today using perhaps AutoCAD or AutoCAD LT, you will see a significant benefit of moving to Autodesk Revit LT. So that's a very brief overview of some of the core strengths of moving to the Revit product. What I just want to touch on briefly is the position of where that sits with full Revit. I see we've got a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so just going to pause just on that, and I'm just going to pick up on some of the questions that may not have been answered. Okay, so very quickly, and we'll go through some more of these at the end. Okay, so you're going to ask about, several of you asking about the differences. I'm about to come on to that. Okay, this slide is hopefully going to explain why Revit LT and not Revit. So it's really down to choice and what you need to deliver. So I'll touch on that absolutely. The content, so the good question there from Graham Jury. The question is there's no MEP or there's no MEP ribbon tab. Yeah, as I said during the demonstration, you don't have that MEP functionality within Revit LT. You're really looking at the Revit that comes with Building Design Suite for MEP. And I would say for structural engineering, again, the full Revit version, absolutely. Okay. I'll leave Ralph to answer the question around robots. He's our expert in that. I put in doors, and I put some doors in there, I put some walls in there, and Roger Evans, you're asking about component library. You get a very full component library with Revit for all different types of building component, but you're also able to utilize the building components that come from full Revit, or if you were to look at people who offer content such as say NBS in the UK, they provide Revit content. This is compatible with Revit LT just as it is with Revit itself. Okay. In terms of 2D drawings from Matt, you've asked a question there. Fully, import export of DWG. You can absolutely bring data in that's 2D and use that within your project. You can export to 2D so that you've got that DWG workflow. In terms of drawing in 2D, well, every view of the model, if you were to issue a plan view, it is just another view of the model, but it is a plan. So it is really that general arrangement type drawing that you normally offer. Okay. Just some more questions here. Site services. So I mean, you could create model component elements for example, your drainage, your storm drains, etc. That would be down to creating building components for them and laying that out. Okay. Okay. So that's just a few of the questions there. We'll get through to some more at the end. Just want to come back to this Revit LT, Revit comparison slide. So as I talked at the beginning, people are at different stages on really their use of building information modeling. We have people who are using it very early on for the first time. They're seeing a massive advantage from using a tool such as Revit to help them with building information modeling. I think it's very important to get across, building information modeling is a process, it's a strategy, it's a methodology. Revit is a tool that can help you facilitate the deliverables around that. So being able to create deliverables from the building information model. Now, some people are, replicating what they do today in traditional CAD and getting a massive advantage from it. Some people are extending the use of that data much further. So, for example, being able to provide the model data for the contractor to create a construction sequence from, providing it to the quantity surveyor to produce their takeoff from. So, different aspects, right through to operation and maintenance. Being able to really utilize the model for the as-built condition, plugging that into facilities management systems. So there's a whole spectrum of where people are using model data throughout the life cycle of the building. Revit, full Revit, is very much focused on being able to accommodate really that whole life cycle. We have functionality in there such as construction modeling, which we don't have in Revit LT. We have an API in Revit which enables people to customize Revit to create their own linkages with other applications, and therefore that would be more suited to operation and maintenance, for example. We don't provide tools for analysis within Revit LT. So if you're looking at early stage energy analysis, then the tool for you is Revit, or at the moment we have a beta available of a tool called Vasari, which you can also use that for. If you're doing a lot of conceptual massing, early stage design, master planning, we don't have the conceptual design tools within Revit LT. So as you can see on that slide, I think it's very key that this tool is very much focused on your detailed design and documentation. So replacing, improving your workflows that you may currently be doing in traditional CAD. And that's really where it sits. It's down to you as the individual to understand which one you really want to go for in terms of your business, where you think it will sit. if there are cost implications today, Revit LT can help you get on that road to BIM. When you evolve more as a practice, when you develop more skills around it, then there are upgrade paths to move you to the full versions of Revit. Okay, so next slide. So just carrying on the comparisons. So I want to make this clear to everyone because there are some perhaps confusions in the marketplace around the different capabilities of each. Revit LT is only available as a standalone version. So if you are currently a practice today that is using network licensing, Revit LT is not available with network licensing. We have not got work sharing capabilities within Revit LT. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Revit, work sharing, we have various types, but the main one is really the ability to have multiple users work in the same project file at the same time. So someone may be working on the cores, someone may be working on the external envelope, someone may be working on furniture layout. You can have linked files with Revit LT, so you can break down the project into different link files. But for advanced collaboration, where you have a need for advanced collaboration within your own design team, then really, you're probably looking at the full Revit product. Now, initially, this product we thought would be aimed very much at the smaller practice. What we're finding now is that also within the larger practices, where there are divisions who have not yet moved to say Revit. So, for example, we've got large architectural practice customers who've made virtually a wholesale move to Revit, but maybe their interior design arm is not using it. They tend to work more in isolation, and don't have such a need for the collaborative working requirements of the other parts of the business. Something like Revit LT would suit them. That would be a practical solution for them to move to as they look at moving from traditional CAD into a Revit environment. As I mentioned before, we don't have in-product rendering, but you have the ability to use our cloud service to produce renders of your design. No analysis or simulation, as I mentioned. So, there are some questions here around, is this right for a structural engineer? Well, we don't have the components within there for the more advanced structural design. Absolutely, as a building designer, you have structural components, but we don't have embedded analysis information in those. So, having that link between analysis and the model is a significant benefit. So, if you're looking at bringing those aspects into your process, then again, you'll probably be looking at, the full Revit version. And as I mentioned before, there's no programming interface for Revit LT. So the add-ons that are created out there in the marketplace are not available for Revit LT itself. Saying that though, aspects such as components, what we call families in Revit, are absolutely available and fully compatible. So hopefully that makes that clear around Revit LT versus Revit the full version. I want to make you aware that we do have a full comparison matrix on our website. I'll draw your attention here to the Autodesk.com website /Revit LT. And what you'll see here is that we have a comparison matrix. Okay, you can see that's just come up now. So you can step through that and understand what capabilities Revit has over Revit LT. And this is not, about saying, Revit should be the one you go for. It's down to your business and what you need to achieve, and that's the key part here. So just to highlight some of this, and hopefully we'll pick up on some of the questions that have been asked. So in terms of componentry, absolutely, it's in both versions, with the exception of the construction modeling that I talked about. So what is that? Well, that's where you take a design intent model and you start to break it down into components for actual construction modeling, i.e. a whole floor slab you may break down into pours, concrete pours. Okay, you can't do that within the Revit LT version. We've introduced in the 2013 versions of Revit a new way of creating stairs, which is by component, and that is the only way to create stairs within LT today. Okay. We've talked about structural modeling a little bit. As you can see there's no reinforcement or truss modeling. Can you, one of the questions that's actually come up on the question panel, can you edit families within Revit LT? Absolutely. You have full access to the external family editor. What is not enabled in Revit LT is the in-place modeling families. So your families would need to be all created with the external family editor itself. As I've touched on, the conceptual massing is also not available there. Okay. So if you are looking at that push and pull, very early stage of design, full Revit is going to have that capability, and also our tool that's currently in beta known as Vasari. We've touched on the rendering, again, just to reiterate, you have capability, but with Revit LT that's done within the cloud. The documentation, absolutely full capability there around drafting, around annotation and tagging, being able to schedule and do materials takeoff are all there within the product itself. From a collaboration point of view, we don't have the interference checking that is available in the full Revit. You can open your Revit LT file, of course, in a product such as Navisworks for being able to do interference checking, clash and detection. I've already talked about the work sharing, which is the multi-user environment. So just to reiterate, Revit LT very much focused on the individual who doesn't need to have multiple users working simultaneously on the same model. Okay, just want that to be very, very clear. Okay, linking of files, you can absolutely utilize a workflow where people are working within full Revit and reuse that data within Revit LT. So for those of you familiar with AutoCAD, very similar to the concept of the XREF. Okay, so being able to link from the different flavors of Revit or the full version from the Building Design Suite as well. You can tag and you can schedule elements within link files. There are some aspects of functionality that aren't available in Revit LT around more advanced customization of the visibility of the models. Okay, if you're looking to get a greater understanding of these aspects as well, then I would urge you to talk to your reseller for a more in-depth understanding of the product capabilities. People have asked around, capabilities of import and export. Very much as I said before, DWG format. You can import it, you can export it. You can import SketchUp files if need be. MicroStation, Bentley, V8 version, DGN can come in to full Revit, but not, sorry, I got that wrong. No SketchUp or DGN import for Revit LT. My apologies there. And also, you don't have capability to bring point clouding. So if you're working on projects where you're getting a lot of point cloud data, full Revit has that capability to import those and for you to be able to start to build the model from those point clouds. Okay. We do have, however, export to DGN. I need to correct myself there. So there is export, not import of DGN. Okay. If you're looking at a workflow around energy analysis, GBXML is not supported from Revit LT. It is supported from the full Revit. So that's where you get volumetric data out of the model that is used in energy analysis tools, whether that be from Autodesk or from third parties. In terms of solar study, it's very much only a still study. Those of you who are full Revit users, we don't have the sum path capability within Revit LT itself. Okay? And we certainly don't have connection through to our Autodesk 360 energy analysis tool either. Okay? So just so that you're aware there of the capabilities. Again, I would just point you back to that website and to your reseller so that you can take a look at that yourself. It's fully publicly available. You can just go and download it. You can there's also comparison matrices between Revit LT and AutoCAD LT as well. Okay, so we have that available. So very much a call to action is visit that website. There is a trial available for 30 days. If you're currently in a traditional CAD workflow, I'd urge you to take a look at that. get some advice from your reseller around best practice around that, and very much talk to them about pricing. We won't talk about that here today. Prices vary from country to country. We are broadcasting out to a lot of Europe, so talk to your local reseller is the key part. Okay, so we've left time. There are I've got 284 of you online at the moment, which shows the amount of interest there is for this product. Lots of questions have come in. I'm just going to look at some of those questions that have come in here. Take off the ones that have been answered. Okay. Are volumes and airtight building envelope information available through LT? No, they're not. So you don't have that capability of GBEX now, as I mentioned there. IFC, yes, it's not supported in Revit LT, but IFC is supported in full Revit. Okay. The render tool, question from Walter there in Revit LT. It is. You're asking, is it standard or extra? First of all, it's available with subscription. There are, depending on how much rendering you do, there will be the ability to purchase additional what we call cloud jobs, which enable you to run more rendered jobs up through the cloud. Again, something to discuss with your reseller. So Gary Foy, you are more an interior designer. It seems that Revit LT is more architectural. Is this correct? I would say yes. That if you look at the tool set that's in there versus the full version of Revit or the different flavors of Revit that we apply, then yes, the tool set is more architectural. One way of looking at this is, it's 10 years since we acquired the Revit Corporation. Revit has advanced significantly in that 10 years. Revit LT is, if you like, going back to some of those earlier times of Revit where people hadn't yet moved to it. There was perhaps less functionality within the model. It's still a very capable product. It's just that we've had some capability taken out to suit different target markets. That's really where it sits. Okay. Haley, you're asking about how many renders can you do. You'll need to check that through your reseller, I'm afraid. I don't have the current status on how many jobs are allowed there. Can a Revit LT model be brought into full Revit for analysis and simulation and development? Yes, and it is fully compatible with Revit. The RVT file will open seamlessly within full Revit itself. So Jason, you've asked about learning curve from AutoCAD to Revit. And that's really going to depend on different aspects. There is a mindset change. I did move from AutoCAD to Revit in my time. There's a mindset change into how you produce things. What we've done with Revit LT is we've provided from the start page of Revit LT more video tutorials to help you. There is an online help. There is an online wiki. There's also the services of your reseller to help you move. Other aspects around methodology and strategies for moving to BIM are other, are aspects you need to take into account. But certainly, a lot of people do pick up Revit very, very easily. It's, it's designed really as a tool that's focused on the way you design, not about just documentation. The documentation is a byproduct of the model, and the people that we talk to, have been using Revit for some time, really don't really want to go back to a traditional CAD workflow once they've used Revit. Okay, lots of questions coming in, which is great. So, Enrico, you've got full Revit Architecture 2013. So, not quite sure about the question there around training. I mean, you're already on full Revit Architecture 2013. There's no need for you to look at Revit LT unless you have adjacent opportunities within your company where they've not yet moved to Revit Architecture. Okay. Chris, you're asking about modifying a stair-by sketch. Certainly, if you've imported a model from Revit, I believe it's possible once it's imported. I would need to double check that. Okay. So let's just see. Lots of questions here.
Lots of questions.
Okay. Don't know how many you've answered, Ralph. I know you're on.
My fingers are getting a bit hot.
Okay. I'm just showing the unanswered at the moment. So, okay. So, Matthew, you're talking about full floor plans. You would put new areas of work into Revit and develop it from there. So, you can have a hybrid. You can utilize existing DWG data. So, say for example, you've got existing building. You could bring that to that 2D DWG data in. You can use Revit to develop that design further. You can have a hybrid between 2D and 3D, absolutely. Okay. In terms of computer system requirements, we publish those on the website, so I won't run through them all. Okay, but there are minimum and recommended guidelines on the Autodesk website itself. Okay. Just to clarify, sorry, Barry, you're asking about can a SketchUp file be imported? Sorry, no, it can't. I just need to clarify that. You cannot import a SketchUp file. One of the reasons being there is that we don't have the actual concept of conceptual massing objects within Revit LT. So just to clarify that, I made a mistake on my first comment about that.
You can actually import link CAD a SketchUp file.
So right. Okay,
it's the importing into a masses. I think we're referring to there, isn't it?
Okay, so linking capability, but not the import where you can actually reuse it. Okay. So Paul, you're asking about bespoke shop fitted items. I mean, with the family editor, you've got the same capabilities you have with full Revit. Absolutely. Is the webinar going to be recorded? Absolutely, it's being recorded right now. Andrew, you're asking about fast track building design software and a link there. So all I can say around that is, there is no IFC export. So you'll have to look around the compatibility tools based on that. Okay, Alan, you're asking about change and change of documentation. This is a very common question from customers when we're looking at Revit. There still needs to be an awareness of the changes that you make aware. There's still that quality assurance process that's required with that. There are tools available where you can, for example, compare different states of model. Often, most people would revision still on a sheet by sheet basis, just so you're aware. So Simon, you're asking there about point data. So I think I just covered that, but no, you cannot import point cloud data in. Okay. Can you bring conceptual masses from Revit into Revit LT? They should open into Revit LT. But you're not going to actually be able to do anything with them. Okay, let's just see. Can full Revit do full RC frame analysis? Ralph, over to you.
Yes, when it's linked to robot or other third-party analysis and design applications.
Okay, thank you. And another one for you, Ralph, from Andrew. Can structural frames be modelled in Revit LT, then open in the full version and analysed from there?
Don't see any reason why not. It's just checking the workflow out, but again, you need the robot link or link to other third-party applications to make that work.
Okay. Ellie, you're asking about where would be best to get M&E families from. I mean, look at the manufacturers. I mean, certainly we do. Certainly for people with full Revit, we had full Revit MEP in the past. We've created a fuller UK content pack for that. Now, if you're very much looking at M&E, then you're probably going to be looking at Revit MEP or Building Design Suite, to be honest. Brian, you're asking about the Revit plugin for MBS. Good question there. Does it work with Revit LT? As we have no API, I would suggest not at the moment. Bruno, you're saying that you're not competent at AutoCAD 3D today. Do you need training before using Revit? So AutoCAD 3D functionality and Revit 3D are there is no similarity really. They are different. So you would be looking at getting the right training on Revit rather than AutoCAD 3D capability. Nicola, you're asking about the questions and answers. I mean, hopefully we're covering most of them now here. There could be some, it may be possible for us to email you out some of those questions and answers. So Jay, you're asking about limitations of the family editor. It is the full family editor that's available in Revit LT, as far as I'm aware. Just so you're aware of that. So Mary, you're asking about links demonstrating the use of Revit LT from the beginning of the project. Certainly, you know, apart from the conceptual massing, you know, there are that capability is not within Revit LT. There are an awful lot of videos and wiki help files that are out there on the internet. You know, if you just do a search on Revit, the functionality is exactly the same with Revit LT. You will find an awful lot of content on the web around how you start from scratch, how you create a new project, etc. Okay. Can 3D, from Gary, can 3D ground modeling be done from AutoCAD 3D, AutoCAD survey data? We do have the same site tools within Revit LT as we have in full Revit. Okay. So yes, you can bring in point data. You can bring in, for example, just AutoCAD 3D point data, not point cloud data, just to make that clear, and use the site tools for that. Is all detailing Revit LT section two-dimensional? Well, I mean, typically detailing, you know, the majority of people would do that as a hybrid between 3D and 2D. So the detail would be drafted. You do have that capability within the families themselves to embed 2D data marks. So you have that. You may have a specific, for example, window head detail that you always use. You can embed that into the window family. Whenever you cut a section through that window family, that detail always shows. The capability is there within the family editor to actually create 3D details if you want to. The majority of people today wouldn't actually do that. Right, Enrico, you're asking about lighting analysis. You know, within Revit itself, you don't have the capability to do lighting analysis. You're talking about a product there. I'm not quite familiar with ATI 32, where it says it allows import of Revit files. If that's a native Revit file, then yes, it would import a Revit LT file. However, if it's something like IFC or GBXML, then no, you don't have that export capability. Okay. Some other questions there around how easy is it to create 3D blocks. So I think what you're talking about there is families, how do you create families. We have a recorded webinar of the actual family editor and how to create families, so I would refer you to that, to be honest. The webinar will be recorded and available from the registration site that you went to when you signed up for the actual webinar itself. Again, can LT be used for content creation? Yes, it can. We do have the family editor in there. Are there any backward compatibility issues with past Revit releases? So, Paul, with Revit itself, you can never go back a version. You're always going forward. That is the nature of the tool itself, that you're always really going forward. So, you can't save back to an older version of Revit from either full Revit or Revit LT. Walter, are there any MEP functions in Revit LT? No, there aren't. In the model project that I showed, as I mentioned, that MEP was the linked file from the building services engineer. That capability is in the full product itself. Okay. Tony, around external works in Revit LT, landscape features, car parks, you can create all of that. You can model all of that within Revit LT. You have that possibility. Okay, just a few more comments here. So will Revit LT work with Autodesk Design Review? So you have that ability to export to DWF, which Design Review reads. So I would say yes to that. Simon, you're asking about Revit 2010 and cloud rendering. That capability is not within Revit 2010. You need to be moving to the current version, 2013. Daniel, you're asking about similarities between Revit and MicroStation. I'm not a Bentley MicroStation user, so I really couldn't compare the two on that.
I would suggest.
Really a different.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
I think you're more likely to compare MicroStation to AutoCAD, to be honest. So, Robin, that's a great question around the conceptual modeling. Yes, it's correct. The conceptual modeling tools are not within Revit LT, and they are the masses that I'm talking about, the push and pull masses. But of course, you can absolutely create a very early concept design using building elements such as walls, floors, windows. Absolutely no problem with doing that. It's very quick to get started. As I mentioned before with the demonstration, you can make a change at any time. You do not have to be specific at the outset. You could just create a wall type that is, say, a 300 mil thick wall. It's got no layer information in it about how that wall is constructed. Not a problem. Just start drafting with it, start creating the building model, and then when you develop that design, get more specific. That's absolutely key there. So Paul, you're asking about creating mechanical electrical 2D drawings. And certainly Revit LT is not the product for you in that realm, but I would say look at all Revit MEP or the building design suite.
There's a question from Michael on steel sections, and Revit LT does ship with a range of steel sections, but it does ship with a full range of profiles, and if if the profile that you're after isn't covered, then it's a relatively straightforward exercise to create a new family, as Simon's already mentioned.
Simon Wilkes, you've asked what's the difference between point data and point cloud data. So point cloud data is what we're talking about, really coming from the laser survey equipment, typically in a proprietary format, whether it's someone like Leica, Faro, or what have you. What I was saying really around 3D AutoCAD point data is as you've alluded to, around CSV. Okay, it's just points, points that have been set with a, for example, a Z value within AutoCAD that you can bring into Revit, and from there you can create the Revit topography. Okay. Ellie, you just asking for clarification again around Revit LT for M&E consultants. I mean, it's a decision you'd have to take after looking at the product, but what we're not putting into Revit LT is the capabilities around creating the building services model. So, duct runs, pipe runs, being able to take advantage of the tools within Revit MEP for, documentation of building services. It's definitely something to talk to your reseller about looking at Revit MEP. Okay. Lots of questions.
There's one, Simon, about creating a wall from a generically modelled surface. I think is that wall by face?
Right. So we don't have massing tools within there. So you don't have that ability to create you're not able to create the mass to create a very complex shape wall. Something you could probably do within the family editor. If need be. Excuse me, just losing my voice. Okay. Can you upgrade from Revit LT to full Revit? Yes, you can. There will be an upgrade path for that. At the moment, I'm fully aware that you can do to building design suite. You need to check your research specifically if there's an individual flavour of Revit that you're looking to do. Okay, Mike's asking about 2D. I carry out a survey of existing property without knowledge of structure. Would I be best to do this in 2D resource CAD import, or can I draw the plan from survey dimensions in Revit LT? You can certainly draw the plan from your survey dimensions straight into Revit LT. No problem doing that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's a workflow that works really well. To be fair, I mean you might see it as doubling up on some input, but the benefit of taking a 2D and then adding the 3D information into Revit is then when you cut sections and take additional views of it, you're getting a lot for free, effectively. Yeah,
excellent, thanks. So I'm very conscious we are now right up to the hour. We've had a lot of questions come in. Hopefully we've answered the majority of them for you. There is going to be a recording available of this, as I mentioned before. We will make that available. It won't be instantly, maybe within the next week. That will be available from the website on which you actually registered on autodesk.co.uk. Thank you very much for your time today. My contact details are below. If you follow people on Twitter, you may want to follow me, ADSK Sustain. My team also has a blog, as you can see on their BIM Toolbox. I will leave that on screen for a few more moments. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your attention today. Please provide feedback. If you have much further, more detailed questions, then do please speak to your reseller about either the move to Revit LT or to Revit or Building Design Suite. Thank you very much.